Hey there, I'm author Sarah A. Chrisman.
And I'm Gabriel Chrisman.
And today we're going to talk about the works of American poet Ella Wheeler Wilcox. So, Ella Wheeler Wilcox was pretty famous as a poet in the late 19th and early 20th century, and there's a particular one of her poems that continues to be famous today. We're going to be focusing on her two collections, Poems of Passion and Poems of Power, today. The most famous one of her works is from Poems of Passion, and as I read it, you're going to recognize it right away, because at least you'll recognize the first couplet, because this one has really stayed pretty famous. Laugh and the world laughs with you, weep and you weep alone, for the sad old earth must borrow its mirth, but has trouble enough of its own. Sing and the hills will answer, sigh it is lost on the air. The echoes bound to a joyful sound, but shrink from voicing care. Rejoice and men will seek you, grieve and they turn and go. They want full measure of all your pleasure, but they do not need your woe. Be glad and your friends are many, be sad and you lose them all. There are none to decline your nectared wine, but alone you must drink life's gall. Feast and your halls are crowded, fast and the world goes by. Succeed and give and it helps you live, but no man can help you die. There is room in the halls of pleasure for a large and lordly train, but one by one we must all file on through the narrow aisles of pain.
So, what year was that one?
This particular edition of this book is 1883. And by the next decade, that poem was so famous that people were already satirizing it. Mm-hmm. There's a cycling journal that we read from the 19th century where someone has rewritten that as bike and the world bikes with you, walk and you walk alone.
Yes. Which
is rather, I don't know, it's kind of a nasty dig at what was clearly a very heartfelt poem. I think if Ella Wheeler Wilcox had lived in the 20th century or was living now, she'd probably be diagnosed as bipolar or manic depressive, because especially in Poems of Passion, her poetry really swings from this really beautiful love poetry to this really dark, tortured poetry. And even in the 19th century, even in the 1890s, when she got married, another magazine writer was actually wrote an article saying, well, hopefully now that she's gotten married, her poetry will perk up a bit and be a little more cheerful, because he was tired of the dismal stuff, which is, it's really sad. It has to have been a hard life to be in that perpetual state of back and forth and highs and lows.
Such is the lot of poets.
Such is the lot of poets, it's true. Mm-hmm. Such is the lot of poets. Now, and like I said, Poems of Passion, if you actually look at the word passion, at its root, the word passion means suffering. And that's why when people refer to the crucifixion story, they call it the Passion of the Christ, because it means suffering. And this book has a lot of very suffering poetry. Now, I read to you from that because it's her most famous work. But the one I actually like better is Poems of Power. Now, as you can guess from the title, this is the really empowering stuff. This is the upbeat, uplifting stuff. And this one I really like. These are the poems that really make her one of my favorite poets. Like this one of my very favorites. Will. You will what you will to be. Let failure find its false content in that poor word environment, but spirit scorns it and is free. It masters time, it conquers space, it cows that boastful trickster, chance, and bids the tyrant circumstance uncrown and fill a servant's place. The human will, that force unseen, the offspring of a deathless soul, can hew the way to any goal, though walls of granite intervene. Be not impatient in delay, but wait as one who understands. When spirit rises and commands, the gods are ready to obey. The river seeking for the sea confronts the dam and precipice, yet knows it cannot fail or miss. You will what you will to be. Now, I just love that one because that is about the most empowering poem I have ever read, personally. I mean, that's right up there with Rudyard Kipling's If.
Yes.
And
But a few years earlier.
a few years earlier.
Yes.
And I love this concept of the human will, that force unseen, the offspring of a deathless soul, can hew the way to any goal. And I find that one of the most beautiful concepts of this time period. And it's one that modern times I think have unfortunately lost. Because so many people in modern times tend to say, oh, well, unless you have everything from the beginning, you can never get anything. And this is absolutely her rebuttal of that. Even though she suffered through this manic depression, these periods of very dark struggles within herself, she is choosing this path of empowerment, that you can make circumstance into your servant. It doesn't have to be a tyrant. That you can take the conditions that you're in and make them serve you. And I think that is a very important thing to remember. I think it's a very empowering idea, and it's very, very crucial for all of us to bear in mind, because no one has an ideal life, ever. We're flawed creatures living in a deeply flawed world.
Yes.
And so...
But to me, again, this does reveal the sort of essential humanism of the Victorian period, where they really believed in human ability.
Right.
And human capacity.
Right. And her concept that the human will is actually strong enough to make the gods obey. That is a fabulously empowering concept.
Yes.
That's about as empowering as it gets, really. That's about as strengthening as it gets, which is part of what I love about her work. And then another one, so coming back to this concept of dark times and unfortunate circumstances, but getting through those. That's what this one is all about. It is the tendril's fate. So this is about a little seed. Under the snow, in the dark and the cold, a pale little sprout was humming. Sweetly it sang 'neath the frozen mold of the beautiful days that were coming. How foolish your song, said a lump of clay. What is there, I asked, to prove them? Just look at the walls between you and the day. Now, have you the strength to move them? But under the ice and under the snow, the pale little sprout kept singing. I cannot tell how, but I know what the days are bringing. Birds and blossoms and buzzing bees, blue, blue skies above me. Bloom on the meadows and buds on the trees, and the great glad sun to love me. A pebble spoke next. You are quite absurd, it said with your song's insistence. For I never saw a tree or a bird, so of course there are none in existence. But I know, the tendril cried, in beautiful sweet unreason, till lo, from its prison glorified, it burst in the glad spring season. So it's this wonderful rebuttal to all of the world's pessimists and all of the world's detractors that say, oh, you're just a fool for your optimism because, of course, life is all suffering. And if you have never seen joy, how can you possibly believe that there's joy out there? And it reinforces this idea that if you just have faith that things will get better, then it's only a matter of time before they do. And I think that's another important thing to bear in mind, even through all of the dark times of life. And
I think, Ella Wheeler Wilcox is the classic rhyming Victorian poet.
Yeah.
In terms of that. And that's been looked down on by by later poets who are all into the modernism.
You know why?
Non-rhyming, non-rhythmic poetry.
You know why?
Why?
Because this is harder.
Exactly.
And they don't have the wherewithal to work this hard.
Yes.
But go on.
So I think it's really good this is part of why some of this poetry is no longer remembered as well as it should be. And I would encourage everyone to go and look up some of these poems and enjoy them.
Yes.
That rhyming and that rhythm also really does, to me, it increases the effectiveness of all of these poems.
Absolutely.
It makes them more memorable, easier to remember and memorize. It makes them, it just increases their power.
Yeah, absolutely. And for poems of power, that's
perfectly
fitting.
Yes.
Perfectly fitting. So, don't just limit her all to her most fraught work. Don't just get stuck on the laugh and the world laughs with you, weep and you weep alone. Go and explore some of her more empowering poetry. And these poems have really gotten me through some hard times in life, and I think they have the power to do that for a lot of people, so I hope you'll check them out. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a nice thumbs up, and remember to tell your friends about my books. Happy reading!